Welcome to the Procast. Today's guest has had a distinguished career in many fields, including education, finance, to eventually running his own successful business, to getting involved in the novel topic of water conservation. Having read through his detailed biography prior to this interview, I would say he's had quite an upbringing to then become a truly inspirational leader across business, the voluntary sector, and sport. Today we're going to find out what keeps him engaged across so many different interest areas. In particular, why he's so passionate about helping young people to generally doing good things for the environment, sustainability, which of course are the main themes of this podcast. We welcome Bruce Priday. Bruce, good morning, and thank you for being with us.
Hi, Nick. Thanks very much for the invite. And that was some billing. I didn't recognise it myself, but I'll try and pick up on some of those points as we go along.
Brilliant. Well, let's start the podcast briefly explaining about Smarti, so the organisation that you're involved in, and then we can get into a much deeper conversation later in the podcast. So just briefly tell us about the organisation, when it was set up, and then how you got to being involved.
Sure. I was asked to look at a nascent business that was looking to take away flushing in urinals. I was either asked to shut the company down if there was nothing, that could be done with it, or was there an idea there? And I thought there was an idea there, so I'll go into detail if you want me to later, Nick. But we took on a UK license of what was the leading technology in the sector about 5-6 years ago, and then have developed our own IP since. So it's a business that means that you can avoid using potable water to flush a urinal.
And the theme is water conservation, because obviously that's such an important topic. And as yes, we've had rain, but to get potable water, can be quite a challenge. And so looking at it, you said 5-6 years ago when you first started to look at it. Why did it appeal to you at the time?
Literally because I was asked whether there was anything in this business. I'm always interested in a challenge, and wouldn't by nature don't brush across detail. So I actually asked an industrial designer guy that I knew to come in and tell me whether there was anything in it. And the fact that he latched onto it so quickly, that further inspired me. But then when I started picking up the fact that water is so critical, I don't think people have woken up to the fact that, in the future, wars won't be fought over oil, and they'll be fought over water. There's 700 million people at the moment, with a water scarcity problem in the world. It's the biggest driver of migration, bigger than insurrection. People trying to get somewhere where there's access to water.
No, and we can explore that a little bit further. But let's go back and talk a little bit about yourself. So you're an Exeter man through history. So you grew up in Exeter. Tell us, growing up, how it sort of shaped you, how you started.
Well, the billing that you gave me to start with, the reason I didn't recognise it is because I think it's been more of tripping and stumbling along than just latching on to the next thing. I think at my junior school, I remember going into the dining hall to do a quiz one day that they told us to attempt this quiz, and the quiz was the 11 plus. So I ended up going to the local grammar school, but from the council housing estate, and so I went to school with all the kids from the other side of Exeter, and had mates on the street back in the council housing estate in the evening. So it was even odd from that point of view. I had a double existence, if you like.
Was it a tough upbringing on the estate, or?
No. I wouldn't say it was tough. I mean, it was rugged, and family background was not brilliant. But I think the benefit of my upbringing was it made me very resilient, very responsible for myself. It was only me that could do it. And, it toughens you up, it makes you aware that, it's a bit of a battle, it doesn't just get handed to you. So maybe that's the driver.
That's a driver, yeah. And interestingly, so reading from your biography, you went to grammar school, as you say, and then you almost had, or did you have you got an invitation to join the Royal Navy Academy?
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Well, I was a Sea Cadet, and by happenstance, I joined the Sea Cadets and used to whiz off to the Sea Cadets. So the natural thing was to consider joining the Navy. So when I was at the grammar school, I can't remember how.
So it's just an ignorant thing for me, being from London. Is that because Exeter and that the coast, and that's like a strong part of the country for the Navy? Is that a bit of that?
Very probably. My older, now half brother, now known to be half brother, was in the army. My father, or at least the man that brought me up, he was a military guy as well. So there was quite a lot of military in the background. And I think I just joined the Sea Cadets, and I can't remember why I joined the Sea Cadets. I've always had a massive affinity for the sea, a proper love of the sea. So
do you sail at the moment?
I do. Yeah, I do. Funny enough, when I stopped playing rugby, the only other thing that could stop me thinking about stuff was stepping off a pontoon onto a boat and going for a sail. It would absolutely remove me from all other thoughts. So when I stopped playing rugby, sailing did that for me instead. Yeah.
So then, about 3 years as a cadet.
Yes, I would have been 3 years at Britannia Royal Naval College, but so I was asked to go on the Admiralty board at HMS Sultan, and it's a 3-day thing, and then they give you they invite you to join. You get given a commission to go to Britannia Royal Naval College. But there was a school teacher, like with lots of people. There was almost to please him, I will leave the university instead of joining the Navy. And of course, because of my background, nobody had actually suggested that all I needed to do was tell the Admiralty I had a place at university, and the Navy would have sent me to university, but that didn't happen. So I went to university instead of joining the Navy. Yeah.
But that's what I was looking at your biography. That's a very novel thing, and it's that kind of link between, would you call him an inspirational teacher and a leader at the time?
Sure.
Someone you looked up to?
Yeah. And I think I could name 2 or 3 people in my life that have been that father figure, that sort of person who I would look to when I couldn't work things out. Now, I think in life that's absolutely critical. It's those people that pick up on you as an individual, is where your luck in life comes from. It's who gives you the break.
So then you went through university, and then it was a few years in education.
Sure.
That's right. How did you find life in education?
Can I be controversial?
Go for it.
I did a degree and a PGC at Loughborough. Went to Loughborough essentially to play rugby, and I think that's why Alan Rees wanted me to go to Loughborough. So I was there with some good startling boys. I was there at the same time as Woodward, for example, Clive Woodward.
Oh, really?
And but the
did you know Clive at all? Or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, Clive. Know Clive very well. Yeah. The certainly back then, and I've seen him since.
Sure.
Weirdly enough, one of the last couple of times I saw Clive was at Britannia Royal Naval College. He'd been asked there to speak, and the Commodore of the college had asked us to go and stay with him for this particular evening. And so weird how things go full circle, isn't it? But so I went to university without really knowing what the outcome was going to be. Did a 4-year course that included a PGCE and then became a teacher. And the controversial bit that I was going to say,
go for it.
I loved teaching kids, and I loved seeing how you could bring stuff out of a kid. And I didn't like working with teachers. But don't get me wrong. I have loads of friends still, and they'll be horrified if they hear this, but I've got loads of friends who are teachers on an individual basis. Brilliant people. A staff room is a little nest of victimhood like you've never come across. So I couldn't. So I taught for 5 years and thoroughly enjoyed it, but it wasn't where my future lay.
What level did you just teach out of interest?
Oh, I'd up to O level back in the day, GCE level, history and English but I was mainly employed to coach rugby and athletics. But yeah, so I taught English and history and PE teaching.
You were teaching that, but I bet you the students loved your stories about the sea and the Navy as you threw that stuff in, so it made you a little bit more of an interesting character, I would have thought.
I think what it was is because I'd had, a bit of an oddball background, I could pick up on the kids that weren't particularly fitting into the system but had something about them. So, there's 2 or 3 kids.
And from your own background, as you said, that toughened you up and, made you that kind of all-round person, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Good. So then what made you further down the line? So there was another cross path, as I say. And then you went into a background I'm familiar with, which is finance. So tell us, how do you get into finance?
Right. I knew that I didn't want to go on and do teaching. And in fact, the school I was at, it was a private school, the last school I was at, which I'd been reluctant to go to because I'd said to the headmaster, who was captain of Exeter, and I was his vice captain, Exeter Rugby, I'd said to him, private education, socially divisive, scourge of the nation, etc., etc., etc. But he said, well, come and work at my school before you hold those opinions. And when I saw the kids bounding up the drive to get into school, I don't remember bounding up the drive to get into my school. So principles left aside, I wanted to earn enough money to be able to give my kids a good education. So I left teaching just as our first child was born, and then investment management company that put me on a training course that I did very well at. It was obviously something that was a bit natural in me. There's I think there's plenty of the salesman in me, so that's probably what they spotted. And so I worked for them for 12 months, and then my wife's accountants, because I'd helped her set up a bridal franchise, and my father-in-law had wanted me to go into the construction sector, working with him. But I'd sort of taught myself to do the payroll and what have you in the businesses and do the accounts in my wife's business. So the firm of accountants, quite a large firm of accountants who I used to liaise with, out of the blue, they offered me a job. And I said, why would you want to hire me? And I remember the guy, I spoke at his funeral, actually, the managing partner. And I remember the guy said, we can teach you what you need to know. What we can't teach you is attitude. So that's how I got into accountancy. And
potentially your attitude was spot on, Bruce. That's what probably carried you over the line. Yeah. You went on, so you described as getting particular experience in corporate finance and
sure.
The skill set involved around that, which sort of, I think, made you perfect at identifying businesses like Smarti, which we'll get to in a second. But then the last thing kind of wanted to ask you before we get to that point is you worked for a few companies, you learned the trade, as they say, and then you went on and did the entrepreneurial step, and you set up your own business.
Sure.
So tell us about that point, when you got to that point, and what was the motives, what was the drivers?
I saw the partnership that I was working for have a bit of an infight amongst them, and there are a few changes within the partnership. I mean, we're talking 91. You don't look old enough to remember the meltdown back in 88, 89, 90, 91. But there was a massive meltdown, and the banks back in those days.
Was that the Nigel Lawson boom bust?
Yeah. And
I paid attention in school. Yeah, we're gone.
the house prices fell off a cliff, which is a big influencer on the UK market, isn't it? And they cancelled double Miras, and they cancelled mortgage interest relief at source, and it had a massive impact on the value of houses. And if houses go down in value, the banks panic, and because everything in the UK is underpinned by house values. If you follow it all the way back, so the partnership went through a bit of. You could tell there was tension in the partnership, and by this time I was sort of operating at sort of partnerish level and running a subsidiary company for them that did financial planning and tax and that sort of thing. And the reason I'd set it up it had been set up as a subsidiary so that we could offer the specialist services we had to people who had accountants other than the firm I worked for. So, and then they decided that they needed to shrink the thing. So I then realized that I don't have control over my destiny unless I own the show. So I went to them and said, I'm going to leave. And they said, oh, you just upset Bruce, come back after Christmas and we'll talk about it again. And I said, I've crossed the Rubicon. I'm sorry, I'm going to go and do this. And the senior partner actually insisted. Myself and my wife went up there for dinner, and I remember his wife saying to me, "You can't, Bruce. You've got young children. You mustn't do this. You're taking too big a risk." But that was the first big risk in life. And to be fair to my wife, she just backed me every step of the way, and it was a big risk. And so I set up the business in 1991, and here we are now. So, and then concentrated. I liked the corporate finance bit for the SME sector. I like dealing with entrepreneurs. I think I understand them and can talk to them. And so that's the area I concentrated on, and other people did the accounting, and tax was a big area, and we've now got a big fund management arm and all sorts of things.
But it's great you've had that discussions with your partner that what your plans were and what you're going to do, because sometimes it's you come home and you go, oh, by the way, I've just quit a really successful paid job and I'm going to do things on my own, and then the partner's like, oh my god, well it's a shock to the system. But no, it's great you had that support early on, and
she married a lunatic, so she had to live with
fine.
it.
That's terrific. And then fast forward. Talking to you a little bit earlier before we started the camera rolling, that business went on, and you handed over the reins.
Yep.
To your son.
Yep, James. Yep.
And until recently, you were involved, but now you're as a consultative.
Yeah. I mean, I still work with clients. In fact, today we've got a completion of a sale for a client, and I've managed that process and been involved because the client wanted it, and he's the sort of guy that I would get involved with. So I don't run the business. I'm not in. My wife and myself are still big shareholders in it. So I will do client work when it's appropriate, and but I'm not in there every day, and I haven't got an executive role at all. I've left it to my son, and I have to say, in the 5 years since I stepped down as chairman, he's taken the business on in leaps and bounds. I mean, if I'm proud of anything, I think it's that, the fact that he's been able to take it to the levels he's been able to take it. What he's added to the business since he's been in charge is stunning.
Oh, brilliant. And that's a little biography of how you got here. And so now going back to the main topic
Sure.
of today, which is about water conservation. Now, I met you a few months ago. This was end of January this year, and you did a presentation at the Green Advisory Council, or the GCAP, at Exeter College. And one of the things that really stood out for me, living in London, is on one of the slides you had, if we don't do anything or we don't take action to prevent or to mitigate water conservation, or the preservation of it, London could potentially have water shortages by the year 2040?
Absolutely. Sooner than that. And this is proper scientific data from credible sources. London will be short of water in the very foreseeable future if there isn't some sort of addressing of the problem. I mean, we all know what's happening at Thames Water at the moment. They're verging on bankruptcy because they need Ofwat to give them to approve a 40% increase in the selling price of water over the next phase. The 5-year phase from 25 to 50. Ofwat are reluctant, but Thames Water have said they've got an infrastructure bill of £90 billion facing them. And they've actually said that London, that their area of service, they could be 1 billion litres short of the water need by 2050. That's their own figures. Now, I suppose cynics would say that they'll pump those figures up to try and impress on Ofwat that the price rise should be there. But I don't think there's much doubt in it. I mean, one of the geological factors around London is the water table's going down. The clay that London's built on is shrinking, and that's cracking the pipes. The infrastructure, even the water infrastructure, is changing as a result of climate change. This is serious stuff. Water is more fundamental than than anything. So serious.
But tell us, why do you think? Because obviously, from a narrative and what we hear on the news and from a policymaker's perspective, there's a whole emphasis on carbon reduction, net zero. Why do you think water gets missed out of that conversation?
Well, I think the ESG scope. Companies are now reporting on their ESG consciousness, and scope 3 has come up this year actually, and water is part of the scope 3. Scope 1 and scope 2 have talked about power and the like, but in 2024, scope 3 now becomes an issue that they'll have to address. There's a fundamental problem with believing the water thing, because in the UK it rains and there's water everywhere. And you said it, only 3% of the world's water is potable, and 2.6% of that is inaccessible. It's either in glaciers or deep underground. So the amount of potable water is limited. But I mean, added to which, the scientific data that I was referring to earlier, that scientific data suggests that the rivers in the UK will flow at half the rate they flow at the moment by 2050. The reduction in availability to drinking water, to potable water, it's a crisis.
For the UK, is it because you talked about London's kind of geological challenges, but is it also a function of the way we build on stuff?
Sure.
Is it population? Is it a combination of issues, or is it one issue that's leading the reason behind reduction in potable water and the way the rivers sort of flow, as you said?
Climate change, without any doubt, is having an effect, i.e. the weather effects are more dramatic, so you get a massive water all in one go. We haven't got the infrastructure to collect it.
And then it just spills and flows out into sea or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Disappears. So it's a much more dramatic weather pattern, which is very difficult to match the weather patterns to water demand, because water demand is ubiquitous, and the weather patterns mean that there's lots of water, then none at all. Droughts around London, they anticipate serious droughts around London. Cape Town and large parts of California have had, water turn-offs in the last 12 months. If the data is to be believed, then, London's not far away from, where water supply shortages will impact on the population. And, that changes everything. I mean, the main thing about water is that the water isn't just about drinking. It's all about farming. water security equates to food security. So there will have to be changes in the governmental changes in the way that water in the food supply sector, water supply to them is protected so that food shortages don't amass as well. Food and water shortages will lead to, all sorts of problems, social problems. So it's a big, big thing. And I'm assuming government are aware of it, but I just can't see them acting upon it.
And what have you seen around the world? Are we the worst? Not the worst. Are we one of the worst countries out there at managing potable water? Because you've obviously travelled and you've done voluntary work in some of the developing countries.
Sure. The best statistic I can give you is that Denmark they now export electricity that they get from wind power. So smaller country, much more easy to manage, and they're quite Germanic in their manner. So they're all very socially minded and contribute to the bigger picture. But for example, a urinal flushes 100,000 litres of water per annum. And to create that potable water that ends up flushing in the urinal, that creates 105 kilograms of carbon, net carbon per annum also. In Denmark, 98% of public sector urinals are water-free. In the UK, it's about 3%.
So Bruce, that was very interesting, because that leads me on to the actual Smarti technology itself. You talked a little bit at the top of the podcast, but tell us a little bit more about the technology itself, the concept of it being, was it a Danish patent? Was it a unique patent? How did it sort of start?
Well, interestingly, when I first looked at this business, it was some Swiss technology. And so when we contacted the Swiss company and said to them we're interested in their technology, we zoomed off to Switzerland once and then went back a second time, only to find that they'd been bought by an American company. And the American company that bought them were Falcon Water Technology. And that was the guy that monetized eBay, owns 50% of Falcon Technology, and a guy that sold his infrastructure business in Los Angeles to Paul Allen while he was still alive. So two very wealthy individuals, and it was part of their portfolio. They'd made some money, and they wanted money to go into business, but obviously sectors that would help. And this was all based on the fact that water security in California was such a big thing. So we took a UK and Irish license of their technology, and to prove concept, prove that the UK would want it, and we were able to get into the NHS and that sort of thing. But as the guy that I brought in was an industrial designer, and it was very apparent that this could be improved. So we got the help of Exeter University and dug into enzyme technology. So our valve is unique. It's patented, UK and around the world. It has enzymes within it that keep the pipes clear, because male urine will block pipes because it's full of protein, so that's why men's bathrooms often have a urinal, blanked off, because it's blocked and will flood. So there's enzyme technology in it. So we improve the technology leaps and bounds. I mean, way forward, and we've introduced that to our own technology now. And the Danish people that I mentioned, they've seen the technology, and they've switched to our technology away from the American technology on the basis that it is a vast improvement. So what I did was find a guy that could do something about it. So usual pattern to my life. It's not me particularly, it's me spotting something, then finding the guy that can do it.
But why I also potentially like this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's because normally Britain would invent stuff and then other people around the world would see what we do and just do it better. So would you say here we've taken some concepts and we've put a real British touch onto it, and we are
sure
with Smarti with this
Sure.
unique innovation is the leader in this
Sure. I mean,
technology.
I would say so. And we were driven to it because the NHS are actually ahead of the curve on the net zero thing. And so instead of having a piece of kit that was single-use plastic and non-recyclable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we had to come up with some technology that was fit for purpose for the new regulations that one of our major customers was going to bring in. So there was a commercial imperative to us inventing our own thing, but it's an evolution, and other people will have a go, because it's an obvious market that will burgeon, and we've got 2 or 3 direct competitors. But this technology, it helps infection transmission, reduces net zero carbon emissions. One of the things that frustrates me, Nick, I think, is that it's such a simple thing to do, And with countries talking about meeting net zero targets, there's 3.5 million urinals in the UK being flushed with 100,000 litres of water per annum. If we converted those, and not with Smarti technology necessarily, I've bigger ambitions for the nation than that, but if all those were converted, the contribution to the meeting net zero targets is met. A big chunk would be met. I mean, that would be the equivalent of taking 100,000 diesel vehicles off the road every year henceforth. I mean, it's such an easy win for no money. And in fact, the businesses that put it in, and there are a number of businesses, our technology costs about 50% of what you'd otherwise pay the utility company for the water to flush the urinal. And if, prices are going to go up, and they inevitably are, because, the water companies can't, and even if the government take it on, they can't subsidise it to the level that it would need subsidising. So it's such an easy win. And I know in your sector too, you feel similar frustration that there are easy wins. It's winning hearts and minds, and controversial, I know, and I hope it's not too controversial for your podcast, Nick, but I can't understand why the public sector talks so much about these things, but do so little about it within their own built environment. I don't know why they don't bite down hard on it. Perhaps they don't believe in it. Perhaps people are already too busy. I don't know what it is, but I would love to sit down with somebody of influence and just say, look, not us necessarily, but just do this. The government could afford to do it. The government could afford to give all companies a voucher and just say, stop flushing potable water down your urinal. The carbon saving would be massive, and it would improve water security no end. I mean, it's a huge amount of water. So if we stopped all the urinals in the UK flushing, that would be the equivalent of all the water in the Kielder Dam every year. And the Kielder Reservoir is the biggest reservoir in the UK. We could save all the water in the biggest reservoir in the UK.
Interesting. Yeah, perhaps answering your point, why the government are reluctant or well, as you said, to take it up, is perhaps a combination of those issues. But I would say one of the things that struck me from your presentation is in the private sector, and something that's going to be it's going to ride home with where we are filming the podcast today in West Midlands, Birmingham. Aston Villa Football Club, is that correct? Tell us a little bit about that.
They contacted us. They've taken the technology on board. Fantastic sort of engagement. We've installed it. They've delighted with it. They've embraced it. And a major target for us now is to contact all the Premiership football clubs. But football itself is genuinely trying to deliver some sustainability targets. So fair play to football and the Premiership in particular. About a month ago, the FA had, the Green Tech weekend. They really are trying to embrace it. Now, I know this is to do with furnishing their PR message, but the guy from Aston Villa, the estate manager guy there, really took this on board. He believes in it properly, and so we're really proud of what's going on at Aston Villa, and they're a major testimonial for us, and fair play to them. It's a proper, genuine attempt to do things better, provide a better bathroom environment for their supporters, save waste, reduce their carbon ticket, etc., etc. So, Aston Villa do deserve a big shout out.
True leadership. So, talking to you again before the interview, your week sounds like it's jam-packed with meetings and talking about lots of issues and busy with this business. So tell us a little bit about your typical week.
Oh, well, I always say I'm either asleep or I'm awake. And if I'm socializing or working or engaging in leisure, it all overlaps. I don't see any difference one to the other. So do quite a lot of client work. So, I'm what am I, 66 now, nearly 67, but I can't imagine that I know what to do in retirement. So I'm still working sort of 80 hours a week. So I've, had meetings all yesterday morning, nipped up here to Birmingham to see you today, Nick, and then I'm off to Manchester this afternoon for a meeting, and then, back down the road and on Friday. So, I'm involved in development projects. I'm involved in 2 or 3 other businesses that are evolving, and as I say, still doing quite a bit of client work, helping SMEs, either develop themselves or the owners exit from those businesses, and startups. I mean, we've had one in the neurological space, for rugby head injuries, and there was a young guy who was a neuroscience graduate from Exeter University, was said to see me, and he's developed his technology, and we've just been offered, I think a Middle Eastern company that's involved in Formula One have offered to buy the business. So those things are great success. And so the young lad said to me, so what do we do then? And I said, well, those of us that invested, Josh, were looking for multiple returns, but this opportunity is too good for you. We wouldn't stand in your way. So we'll get a return on our money, but this unlocks it for this lad to have an enormous career. He's come up with a bit of technology, unbelievable for a young man to have done what he's done. There is a lot of talent out there, Nick. There is a lot of talent out there, and I love helping those people nurture their talent. And I live well enough, so it's not about money. It's about making things move forward and seeing people achieve things.
And as we get to sort of the closing part of this podcast, going back onto yourself, Bruce, looking at your distinguished career, and looking at all the different paths that you took, would you have changed anything about how you got here?
I don't think so, Nick. On the basis I didn't know any better, I wish I could have learned some lessons quicker. I wish I was a bit brighter at times. I'm typical of anyone, I suspect. I'm quite bright in the areas I'm bright, and thick as 2 short planks in the areas that I'm not so bright in. And so, the one of the beauties of age is that things become clearer. I just wish that I had, the bit of clarity that I've got now. I wish I'd had that when I was in my 30s, but that's not how life works, is it? You evolve as you grow, and your intelligence develops as you go along. So no, I wouldn't have changed anything, because I wouldn't know how it could have changed, if you see what I mean.
And finally, how would Bruce Priday like to be remembered?
That I was, left things better than I found them, created something, and that, there's a number of people who say that I helped them achieve what they wanted to do. Like, the 2 or 3 people in my life, I can specifically mention that without them, they opened the door or they guided me. And, I'd like to think that that thing about passing it on, I hope I've passed a bit on as I've gone along. It's not all been a selfish thing.
Well, Bruce, I think from this interview, I gauged that you are a truly inspirational leader. You've done some absolutely phenomenal things in your career and your personal life. We do, your volunteering elements that we didn't even get a chance to discuss today, and for this audience, you've introduced the novel topic of water conservation, and it sounds like it's what I call a vanilla discussion topic, and it needs a lot more development and needs a lot more engagement.
Sure.
From public and private figures, but you are kind of truly leading that conversation, and hopefully collaboration with all the people that we know. And I thank you for this interview, and hopefully the audience would have enjoyed it, and they'll want to learn a little bit more about Bruce Priday and Smarti and all the things that you've been involved in.
Great, thanks, Nick. I'm flattered that you asked me to come along, and I'm grateful you've given me a bit of a voice, so thanks very much.
Thank you.